All right. Good morning, everyone, to Tanya class Monday morning. Today is the 5th of Shvat. Means we are 10 days from Tu B'Shvat, from the 50th day of Shvat, which maybe next week we'll touch upon. This coming Shabbos marks the 10th of Shvat, which marks the day, a yahrzeit, of the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, and in the year 1950 passed away in New York after coming from Soviet Union in 1940 to New York. And a year later, his son-in-law, our Rebbe, took over leadership on the first yahrzeit. The reason I bring it up is by divine providence, it is very much connected to today's chapter in Tanya. So a little background to what happened that Shabbos, that yahrzeit, and I would like to show some audio and video from that video, and a video more of audio of that Farbrengen, and and the and then kind of tie in and give us a better appreciation to what we're learning. Before I get there, the Rebbe instituted in the early 1980s the Jewish Kids Club called Tzivot Hashem. The Rebbe took this um, tremendous campaign to include children in Torah, in learning, in on any level, any child, any Jewish child around the world. So today it's a very popular Jewish Kids Club, and if you have grandchildren, you should look up Tzivot Hashem. So it marks 40 years actually, and they're trying to recruit more children. It's a free club. You get magazines and different information and toys and campaigns. And the Rebbe started with the campaign that every child should learn by heart 12 Torah passages that are critical, are important, express the importance of a Jewish child and Torah and mitzvahs. And some of the verses are from Torah, some of the verses are from Tanya. One of the verses, and in fact, the last verse, last of the 12 verses, is going to be out of today's Tanya chapter 33, which has to do with joy. It has to do with joy. Joy we talked about last week. If I can bring it up, I was looking through my phone, but in 1991, during the Sukkot holiday, I was privileged to be by the Rebbe with my family, and the Rebbe held a children's rally during the intermediate days of Sukkot, and there were 5,000 or thousands of children there, and somehow, I don't know if it was a raffle or I was picked to be one of the 12 children to lead the announcing of those passages. So if I can find in this class, if not, I'll post it. Not too long ago, I actually found a little video clip of myself being from the Rebbe saying one of those 12 passages. It wasn't the passage of today that we're going to learn, but it was the passage number 9, which is another very important passage from the Talmud. What happened in 1950 was that when the previous Rebbe came out of Soviet Union, the previous Rebbe was incarcerated in prison by the Stalin regime in 1927, living in Leningrad, St. Petersburg. He was arrested on because he single-handedly ran a underground operation of religious activities of Yiddishkeit in Soviet Union, and he was sentenced to death. And with a lot of miracles, he was eventually just sent out to Kostroma, which is in Kazakhstan. No, Kostroma.
No, Kostroma, it is somewhere on Volga Street, Volga River. It's Russia. Russian territory.
Russia. I'm sorry. The Rebbe's father was exiled to Almaty, which is in Kazakhstan, right?
Yes.
Almaty, Almaty. How do you call it?
Almaty.
The Rebbe's father in 1944 was sent, and he died there in exile. The previous Rebbe was sent out, and eventually was able to come back, but he was severely beaten by the KGB and by the NKVD at the time, and physically he was very ill for the remainder of his life. When he came to America in 1940s, there's video clips of that. Was a tremendous um, TV stations. Thousands of people were at the New York Pier welcoming the Rebbe, and you can see him coming off in a wheelchair, and he was only in his 60s. Um, um, Towards the end of his life in the late 40s, he had a very hard time speaking. So he would write a lot, and he was a tremendous spiritual giant, but also a tremendous scholar. And specifically in Hasidic teachings, he would write uh, unbelievable deep concepts of Kabbalah and Hasidus. And typically before Shabbos, he would write a discourse. He would write a discourse, and then they will publish it. So 1950, 10th of Shvat, just like this year, fell on a Shabbos. And on Friday, he submitted his writing, and it was published right before Shabbos. And then he passed away on Shabbos morning. So the Rebbe, his son-in-law, who a year later at the yard site got together for a gathering of Fabrengen. The Rebbe, the previous Rebbe had three daughters. Actually, one was killed in the Holocaust, and the older daughter married Rabbi Guari, and the younger daughter Chaimushka married our Rebbe. The Rebbe did not want to become Rebbe. The Hasidim felt very strongly the Rebbe is the right person to take over, and that and there was some cryptic messages actually that the previous Rebbe indicated the Rebbe should take over the leadership. One of the very interesting cryptic messages is actually that he published in handwriting the discourse. It starts with a verse in the book of Song of Songs, Shir Hashirim, where it says as follows, and I'll say it in Hebrew, and it starts like this: Basi legani achoisi kalo. Hashem um, tells as follows: Basi legani, I have come. Hashem says, I have come. Legani, from the word of Gan, like Gan Eden, I have come to my garden. Achoisi kala, my beloved one, my bride. Which Hashem refers to the Jewish people. I've come to my garden. And we're going to elaborate what that means. What does it mean that Hashem came to his garden? And there, the previous Rebbe writes in parentheses a footnote to a medrash. Medrash is the oral Torah on the written Torah, and he writes, check the footnote over there, and he elaborates on the verse. It's very strange to write check and footnote without saying what it is, but if you check the footnote in that medrash, the sage, the rabbi who elaborates on this verse 2,500 years ago, his name was Menachem Chosno. Menachem, a son-in-law. The Rebbe was Menachem Mendel, a son-in-law. So it was an indication his last testament, the last thing he wrote, hinting to his son-in-law Menachem. So, but the Rebbe still did not want to accept the leadership, and the Hasidim got together and wrote a petition, the Rebbe to accept a year later, 1951, and nobody was sure if the Rebbe is going to accept. So the Rebbe called in for a Farbrengen, and at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe spoke. Rebbe spoke different Torah thoughts, but in what makes a Rebbe unique is the Rebbe doesn't only share sermons or Torah, but the Rebbe also shares a Hasidic discourse, which is called in Hebrew a Maimer. which is a lot more deeper, a lot more esoteric and mystical, and that's for a Rebbe to do. And the Hasidim, one of the old elder Hasidim gets up and says to the Rebbe, "You have very nice Torah thoughts. You're brilliant. But we want to hear you say a mimer, which means no time to be a Rebbe." So the Rebbe got very serious, and the Rebbe started the same. The Rebbe started the verse again, "Basi legani achosikalo," as his father-in-law wrote a year earlier, which means again, Hashem says, "I've come to my garden," and the Rebbe elaborated in that mimer what's the whole concept, and this will tie in today's Tanya. And the Rebbe broke into the Rebbe was extremely emotional, and I'm going to give quick a synopsis. And I actually have the audio and video, a little bit of it, 10-minute video of it. We can watch it together. And should we do it at the end? Or we do it now? Let's do it now. Then we can do it at Tanya. We're having a little Verbringen today. But before I show it to you, basically, in what we learned last week, and we're going to learn today, is that Hashem had a purpose of creation. It was the purpose why Hashem created the world, because Hashem wanted a relationship with creation. Hashem wanted that he should have a home in this physical world. Hashem kind of explained that me having angels and spiritual realms is all very nice and dandy. It's very, it's very nice and celestial, but the whole key is to bring Hashem down into this physical world. And so I gave the Torah. And the expression is, I have come to my garden. What is the garden? What does it mean Hashem came to his garden? So we think of garden as Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. But where is the Garden of Eden? What is Garden of Eden? We know that Adam and Eve were created in the Garden of Eden. We always think Garden of Eden is some type of place up in heaven, right? And we die, we go to hopefully we go to Gan Eden. But in essence, Gan Eden is not a spiritual place, it's actually a physical place. It's actually creating, Hashem created the world. Hashem says, I want my garden to be in this physical world. And he created Adam and Eve in this physical world. And the key was, when Adam and Eve were created, that physical and spiritual godliness was all permeated everything. It was just because Adam and Eve ate from the tree that there was a separation, there was this concealment of godliness. And the job was to retract. The job is to bring us back to pre-tree of knowledge days. For that, Hashem gave us Abraham. Hashem gave us Isaac, Yitzchak. And there were 7, starting with Adam and Noach, there were 7 different leaders or spiritual giants, whose job is to bring down the Shekhinah, to bring down Hashem's presence back to the world. In other words, when Hashem created the world, Hashem said, let there be light. So the light of Hashem was dwelling in the world. It was the people that removed the Shekhinah, removed the divine light from the physical world. And it was 7 special people who brought it back. But the last one was Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu's job was to actually bring heaven down to earth through the giving of the Torah at Sinai. So the Rebbe spoke about also, the Rebbe at the end of the mimer connects that with our generation. The Rebbe refers to as our generation as the 7th generation. And there's something very unique about the number 7. We find throughout Torah, the 7 is always the beloved one. There's something about the number 7. And the Rebbe said that we are in the 7th generation to finish this exile we in. The Rebbe himself was the 7th Rebbe of Chabad. And the Rebbe said, our job is to finish the job. Our job is to finish the job, because since the destruction of the temple, kind of the Shekhinah has departed. And our job is to bring back the Shekhinah and to usher in Mashiach. And if we understand that we are so close, and you understand that we have the ability to do so by doing mitzvahs, specifically the mitzvah of loving our fellow Jew, like we learned in the last chapter, because that emphasizes the whole purpose of creation, how I look at myself as a soul being, not as a physical being. How do I look at somebody else? How do I interact with the world? The Rebbe mentioned 7 stories of the great Rebbes, how they expressed love for a fellow Jew. Famously, the story of the Alter Rebbe, our author Tanya. And this is a classic story that the Alter Rebbe on Yom Kippur night by Kol Nidre did not show up to shul one year. Think about the whole city, the whole shtetl, Chassidim are waiting for the Rebbe to come and lead them in the Kol Nidre, the most spiritual of all prayers. And it got late, and they couldn't find Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe came late. They found out that the Alter Rebbe found out as he was going to shul that there was a woman, was a lady who was giving childbirth, and she was home alone, and she was very cold, and she needed somebody to warm up her house. And it was a danger. The cold was such a danger, she could have died. And we know when it comes to life and death, the Torah laws are suspended. So we can think, okay, so who should do the job? Well, let me send a Shlamazel, it's Yom Kippur night. Let me send somebody else to do the job and warm up her house. The Alter Rebbe felt that it is he who should do himself, to set an example. That he himself went and chopped the wood, put on the fire in a house, made sure that she's warm and comfortable. Only then he was able to proceed to shul. When we all have a clarity on our mission and our purpose, is the that's the theme of this chapter, is that brings us renewed energy, renewed joy, and vigor of what we're doing. What am I here for? So let me show you the video, and then maybe we'll have time to finish the chapter. So I'm going to share screens.
On the 10th of Shvat, 1950.
1 second, can you hear?
Yes.
And you can see?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, passed away. His last Hasidic discourse expounds the verse from Song of Songs, Basi Lagane Achaisi Kala, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. It sets forth man's purpose in creation, to reveal godliness within the world. Upon formally accepting the mantle of leadership a year later, the Rebbe analyzed his father-in-law's discourse and laid out a mission statement for the next generation of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. Excerpts from the Rebbe's first Maimer Basi Lagani.
Basi Lagani Achaisi Kala, Dr. Avdruf Meder Shraba Fanort, as Legani in Ksivkan. Neuerdens steht Legani, Lignuni. Das ist Lemokim, Shohoya Yikre Batchilo. Warum Iker Schino, ist betachtein Haus. Is da medayek der Rebbe der Schwert und sagt, Iker Schino betachtein Haus. Oder Iker ist was wir da in der Linie von Schino, ist Davke oder der Linie, wo ist gewähnt, Davke betachtein. Wer bringt weiter herab vom Medrisch, als ich geschrien betachtenem Häuser, bis wann ist sie gewähnt der Chete Zadas, ist hat demot in Jotme Misale gewähnt die Schiene von Orez Lorakia. Wo das ist gewähnt der Riker Hasiluk, Punkt als wie bepasst ist, der Chete Zadas gewähnt der Siebe. Und der Nissina Smokim, also danach können sein der Chetzkais, Hevel und Chetamabel mit die alle. Was am Misale gewähnt der noch von Rekia Alef Lebeis und als Hecher, is ot azay zeichet in dem Pnimisoinien. Is was sie gewähnt der Rikerin Hasilo, ki das hat das alles, was hat sich auch getan betachtein, was mit Misale gewähnt, die Schchina von Elam Hase, von dem Elam Hase Atacht. Dennoch sagt bis wann ist eine gekommen sein Tzadikim und haben zurück Mamschir gewähnt, die Schchina von Rekia sein Lewoven, als weiter und der Rebbe macht davon Bekitzer. Bis wann ist sie gekommen, Mesher Rabbeinu, was Kol Ashwin Chvivin, und hat Mamschir gewähnt, die Schchina von Rekia Halle Floretz. Stellt auf drauf der Rebbe in Chatzoi Igo, was Kol Ashwin Chvivin. Der Fund, wo der Loschen ist, nicht Kol HaChvivin Schwin, nur Kol HaSchwin Chvivin, ist auch Maschma, was de Meile Bose, ist auch das, was ist a Schwi. Was Lichiere ist auch das Ayinien, was das nicht wie Pchirose. Beschaß, mir sagt auf a Sache, dass a Sache Choviv, kann so das ein Ayinien, was gewinnt tolle Birzene, über Avidose, über Pchirose. Beschaß, aber mir sagt auf a was ist das a Chvives. Da Fall, was ist a Schwi, und das, was ist a Schwi, kommt so das Betulde. Das, was mir sagt, a Meile auf Schwi, ist in der Ruf Guffe, ist nicht der Meile von Rischen. Warum mir sagt, a was ist Choviv, da Fall, was ist a Schwi, lo Rischen. Und mit was gewinnt hat dich, wie was lo Rischen geht, auf Avrom Avinu, bringt dort der Rebbe auf im Eimer, was Avrom Avinu gewinnt, wie das ist beim Sires Nefesh. Stellt aber der Rebbe rein, dass nicht gewinnt, wie dem Sires Nefesh von Rebbe Kive, vor dem Sires Nefesh von Rebbe Kive gewinnt, was gesucht, dem Minion von Sires Nefesh. Mose Jovele Jodi Vai Kaimeno. Aschinkin Avrom Avinus Sires Nefesh, das gewinnt bei Mayinim bei der Chagar. Hat gewusst, dass der Wede darf sein, Vayikra schon beschem Hawaii, Keleilom, Altikra Vayikra, Ele Vayakri, als andere sollen noch im Schreien. Bemele ist gegangen in Lavidose. Hat gemacht bei der Chage Vayini von Messias Nefesh, hat das sich nicht gefällt. Is hat der Linie von Messias Nefesh, das auf sehr viel der Iker, Kol Hoaveda, als viele beschaß mir wegen Mesher Rabbeinu, was ist auch, steht in uns Nater al Yode. Farvos, der Favas Kol Ashwin Chvivin, sagt man auf dem beim Kem Gdele Maltameid, und man sagt, was ist der Meile von Kol Ashwin, oder das, was Ashwin Lorischen. Das ist, als bei viele Bibchirose nicht, und bei Vidose nicht. Nur wenn dann mir bekommt fertige Heid, soll man nicht meinen, als er dämmelt ist mit einem Mugbo. Man kann sein, als Joni, was nicht fleiß hier, sagt man auf der Ruf und Chsidis, bringt das herab in das Acheter, als jeder, da viele Schiefko, kann sagen, Mose, ja, gehe Meise, Avese, Avraham, Yitzchak, wie Yankiv. Drauf meinten bei uns mehr nicht, dass die Hakore, wir sollen alle wissen, wir sind gefunden sich in dem der Haschwi. Was für was wird das angerufen mit der Haschwi, dass es mal los ist, und das was Schwi Rischen. Was gewinnt der Hanlage von dem Rischen, als viele hin von Messias Nefesh hat nicht gesucht. Hat noch gewusst, was darf sein in Altikra, Vayikra, Ele, Vayakri, also kommen in der Nord, was man weiß nicht von Göttlichkeit, was man weiß nicht von Niedigkeit. Beis, viele nicht wegen an alles Beis. Sagt dort soll sich ablegen im Ganzen an der Seite. Und Chosha viele bekommt ihm zu gehen und weiß dem interische Bixav. Dort steht Befehl, ich war Jikro, als sie genug als soll rufen. Sagt nem nein, alt Jikro, war Jikro, du willst, hat dir so lang Kinder war Jikro. Ist war Jakri. Darfst du sehen, also die, was haben die von gar nicht gewusst, sollen sehen gehen in die Gassen und schreien, als Harai, Kel, Elo, Manit, Elo, ist eine besondere Sache. Also ich habe der Ramban, Manit, Elo, ist eine besondere Sache. Und Elokus ist eine besondere Sache. Nur dann, dass sie mich schon geschehen, das Elo, nur dann, das und Elo mit dieselbe Sache. Und die haben Hogi, was der ich nicht uns bewiesen. Und was uns bewiesen, der Rebbe, ist, dass das man sich von dem jeden, was gefühlt sich in dem Deschwi, als Chosha viele fühlten sich nicht keine Keches und fühlten sich nicht keine Unionen und schreit nie an die Humani und hat Reis auf der Ruhe. Sagt mir, wie bald, aber ich lebe Pirate. Bis zu Deschwi, von dem und dem, die Schaß, was schon ist getroffen, die Welt. Es darf jeder von uns nehmen auf sich, hat dem in Havede, und hat ihm gegeben, Kechis auf der Ruf, warum sich in der Schwie, also darf sich wissen, dass wie viel Mord für ihn ist gegossen. Und hat wird können nehmen, einteilen, auftan sein Heilig in der Minion vom Amschir sein, dem Schien oder Mato, Belam Hase, Hagashmi, Wachumri.
All right. So, hi, Sandy, you made it down.
Finally, not last week, but yeah, this week.
Good.
That's why I had to ask. Mhm.
So, we did a section on connected to the previous Rebbe's yard side, which is connected to this week's chapter. That so the whole purpose, when we understand our purpose and meaning, why we're here, purpose and meaning brings a person to inner contentment, inner joy. And so it kind of, as in this chapter, he says the sequence is we gotta have faith in Hashem, understanding and believing in Hashem, understanding what the mission and purpose is, which this brings us to inner joy, which inner joy brings us to the observance of mitzvahs. So let's read inside 374, section 2, faith, joy, and action. And below in chapter 36 and 37, we will learn that God's home in the lower world is made through mitzvah observance. Yet here in chapter 33, the emphasis appears to be different. We are taught that God's home is made through conscious faith in the non-dual reality. So where is God's home to be found? In your faith or in your mitzvahs? The big debate, which one is primary, faith or mitzvahs? So we know that in Judaism, we are very much action-oriented. In other words, when you meet a Jew on the street, you encourage them to put on tefillin, to light the Shabbos candles. It doesn't matter if they believe, they don't believe, if they're observant, they're not observant. It is the mitzvah that counts. Just do it. Because a mitzvah in Judaism is a connection. It's a soul connection that you have with Hashem. And your soul wants to do the mitzvah, even if your animal soul doesn't want to do it. If you do it, you got the connection. Don't wait for the faith to kick in. Here we're saying that faith is the one that creates the dwelling space for Hashem. In other words, we said Hashem wants to have a home in this world. What is a home? When we say Hashem wants a home, what is a home? So the definition of a home is, in a home, your essence is revealed. If you want to know a person, how they are truly, you got to see how they act at home. The way they act on the street, the way they act in shul is not necessarily that's not necessarily who they are, truly are. They're just making, they're just having there's a facade. Well, some people, I said last week, they act in shul like they're home, which is fine. So, but if you want to see the essence of a person, is at home. When Hashem says, "Build me a home," as we're going to read in the Torah reading in a few weeks, when Hashem says, "Create for me a tabernacle, a mikdash, a mishkan," what does He say? Hashem says, "Va'os li mishkan," make for me a mishkan, a dwelling place. V'shachanti b'sochem, and I will dwell in it. Hashem is everywhere. Hashem exists everywhere. What does it mean, dwell in it? Yeah, of course Hashem is everywhere, but Hashem wants that you should create the space where Hashem feels at home, where the essence of Hashem feels comfortable, so to speak. So we said here, when I have faith in Hashem, when I say Shema Yisrael, the declaration of faith, and not just shouting it, not just saying it, but actually understanding it and meditating on it, the concept that Hashem is non-dual, that everything in this world is one, the oneness of Hashem, that in itself already creates a presence of Hashem. How, on the other hand, we say, it is the mitzvah, it is the laying tefillin, it is the giving tzedakah that creates the dwelling. So which one is it? And the answer in good fashion, good Jewish fashion, is both are correct. So let's see further. The Tanya now clarifies that the two are intrinsically connected, two sides of the same coin, so to speak. This explains the teaching of our sages of blessed memory. 613 mitzvahs were given to Israel, but Habakkuk came and hinged them as one. As the verse states, the tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. In other words, it is as if there was just one mitzvah, namely the mitzvah of faith in Hashem alone, because it's through faith alone that you come to observe all the 630 mitzvahs. When you're grounded in non-dual faith, mitzvah observance flow naturally from it. The mitzvahs are no longer perceived as a long list of commands issued to you from a higher authority. It's a checklist. Oh yeah, I have to do it. Rather, you feel God's presence powerfully and intimately, and that motivates you to connect to Him at every opportunity through mitzvah observance. And a crucial ingredient for this flow from faith to observance is joy. So again, faith, and when we say faith, not just saying a belief, but faith, true faith, as we learn in Tanya, is to meditate, to contemplate the oneness of Hashem in everything, and actually living by it, meaning you feel it, you understand it. That is true faith in Hashem. That will bring us to joy, that you are such a powerful piece to bring Hashem's presence, that every human being has each a unique contribution to do, and empowerment, that Hashem has empowered each of us to be the one that can bring Hashem down to this world. As we said last week, imagine the greatest person in your life, the Queen of England, will come to your house, knocking on your door, right? Then coming to your house, how would you prepare yourself? How exciting it would be. And in a sense, Hashem comes to your home every single time you open the door, that you would do a mitzvah, and that just by the faith itself, Hashem is present. That gives you joy, and from the joy, you come to want to do all the mitzvahs. Then the mitzvahs are not a burden anymore. The mitzvahs are an exciting experience, meaning that when your heart will find happiness and joy in your faith in God's non-dual oneness, as much happiness as can be, as much happiness as can be, as if you had just this one mitzvah to observe, and this one mitzvah alone is the ultimate purpose of which you and all the worlds were created. Then through the strength and energy that your soul will derive from this great happiness, your soul will be uplifted to overcome anything preventing you internally or externally from observing all the 630 mitzvahs. A mitzvah is faith concretized in action.
Concretized.
While faith remains inside your mind and heart, it's more luminous and intense. In the mitzvah act, your faith is more manifest and contagious. Whenever you are feeling your faith or expressing it in action, you're making a home for Hashem. So the faith is the faith itself is not enough. You got to bring it into action. The action concretize, makes it concrete, the faith that you are experiencing it. And this explains a verse cited by the Talmud as a source for this idea. Tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. Precise use of the term will be enlivened points to the invigorating property of faith. Through this joy, the soul will be invigorated like the future revival of the dead, so to speak. Talmud itself doesn't specify joy as a crucial ingredient that leads from faith into action. The Talmud does hint to the presence of some invigorating force with the words, the tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. That force, the Tanya suggests, is joy, a feeling of a liveliness that propels us into action. Faith has to be alive. When he says alive, what's life? Joy. If there's no joy, it's not true living. And living, invigorating. If you don't have joy in the faith of Hashem, rather, I believe in Hashem, and now I have to do this and this, it's not exciting. Then your faith is lacking the deeper depth and understanding. But the faith needs to be empowering you, to bring you to be invigorated, to have the passion and the joy that will lead you to do the mitzvahs. Up to this point, we have been discussing the joy that you feel as a result of your faith, the joy of feeling God's presence. In this section, we'll turn our attention to God's joy. The Tanya will suggest that by focusing on God's joy, you too will become even more joyous. And it's a joy that is doubled and redoubled, since, as we shall see, there are a total of 4 ideas that leads to joy. Because besides your personal joy, in appreciating, number 1, how, generally speaking, God is close, and furthermore, how he is actually making his home with you, there are 2 further ideas about God's joy. So, in general, in faith and joy and love and fear of Hashem, there's always 2 aspects. So there's the relationship, how I feel about it. I love Hashem. I fear Hashem. I feel close to Hashem, and which is important. But too many times we don't focus on the other way around. That Hashem loves you. That Hashem feels close to you. That Hashem is proud of you. And that Hashem is excited to be with you and is encouraging you. So especially when you teach that to children, it's important as well. When you teach children about God, how Hashem is so great and Hashem is so powerful, Hashem is everywhere, it's equally and not more important to encourage them that Hashem loves you, that Hashem cares about you, because now it's a relationship. It's not something like I need to pay taxes to the government. I need to do a mitzvah because Hashem asked me to do so. But there is a deep relationship, and the joy that I have from understanding what I'm doing, and that I am not only having joy that I'm serving Hashem, but even more so, Hashem has joy from my action that increases my joy. If you help somebody else, right, you get satisfaction. And many times you get satisfaction. But the satisfaction increases when you actually see the difference, the impact you made in that person. You brought them a challah, you brought them a joy in times of need. Now, I was excited bringing the challah, and now she opened the door and just said, you know what it means to me? You made me so much happier. Now your joy even redoubles. So continue here, 376 in the middle. This will bring you a redoubled joy, namely, when you contemplate, that's number 3, God's joy and the immense pleasure brought to him through this faith actually subdues the Sitra Acha. And furthermore, it eliminates the Sitra Acha, transforming its Hapcha, darkness, to light. So he's saying that when he's saying here the Sitra Acha, we know that the evil inclinations and the evil energies that try to take over ourselves, to lead us into places or thoughts and speech and action that are not in line with Hashem. And so the how do we subdue them? So you can subdue them by mind game, right? Mind controls the heart. But when you have not just mind game, but you actually have joy, and you're enthusiastic of what you're doing, the negativity right away, it goes out the door in a much easier way. I'll give you an analogy of when you exercise and you eat healthy, right? It's difficult. But what's the greatest motivator to exercise and to eat healthy? When you see the results, right? When you see the results, you want to continue. You want to continue because you feel better, you feel more energized. So automatically, it's not when you see that piece of cake, it's like, oh, I want that piece of cake, right? And okay, I'm going to control myself not to eat a piece of cake. That's difficult. But if you are, you are excited about, you feel the results, you feel strong, and you know that piece of cake is just going to throw you off, right? It's not, the struggle is not as hard. So similar, think about this as well over here. So let's continue inside. As we have learned, there are two ways in which God derives pleasure and high. The first is from eliminating the Sitra Acha completely. And the second, when the Sitra Acha is subdued. Sitra Acha is the evil energy, is the evil inclination. So one approach is, how do we bring pleasure to Hashem? When we eliminate that desire for something that is not proper. Second is when it's subdued, right? You can have a wild animal in your house, or so one way of getting eject the wild animal, get it out of your house, or the second one is you tame it, you get it, you hold it by the leash. Similar, our evil inclination. One way is that you rejected it completely, got rid of it. The other way is it's inside of you, but I'm holding it by the leash. So in addition to feeling joy and how your faith has brought you personally closer to Hashem, you can also feel joy at the immense pleasure you have elicited on high through subduing and eliminating the Sitra Acha. The nachas that Hashem has that you subdued or you eliminated Sitra Acha, that nachas that Hashem has, that in itself gives me joy and nachas as well. Tanya now clarifies what he meant in point 4 above by darkness. What does it mean when he said that you subdued the Sitra Acha, transforming it from darkness to light? What's the darkness? It just follows. The darkness referring to the klipos in the physical world. Klipos are the shell. In Hebrew, klippa means shell. What is shell? Klippa are the forces that cover up the light of Hashem, which dim and obscure the light of God, and will continue to do so until the time comes from this darkness to end, which is when Mashiach will come, as the verse states. In Joel, he sets an end to darkness, referring to the end of days, when God will remove the spirit of impurity from the earth, and the glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh will see together. The God is speaking, Isaiah 45, and will be explained below in chapter 36, 37. And this transformation of darkness to light is especially pronounced outside the land of Israel, in the diaspora, where the darkness is stronger, since the airspace of other nations was decreed impure by the sages, and is full of klipos and Sitra Acha. And there is no joy before God like the light and joy of eliminating the klipos, which uniquely has the advantage of light emerging from darkness. Simple speaking, when you labor, when you work on something, and it was difficult, was a very difficult process. Once you overcome the process, the joy and the acceleration is a lot more intense than something that you didn't take so much effort to do. Hashem has a lot more nachas and joy when we're able to kind of redeem the light out of darkness when the darkness was very thick. So it gives the example of the darkness of the diaspora is thicker than the darkness in Israel. In Israel, there's a certain holiness that permeates the ear of Israel, and for example, that's why there are different laws and mitzvot that are only connected to Israel that we don't have, or not applicable, or are just applicable for outside of Israel. I was just learning in the Talmud about keeping 1 day or 2 days of the holiday. We know that for example, Pesach and Sukkot and Shavuot, if you're in Israel, it's 1 day or 7 days. In outside of Israel, it's 2 days or 8 days. We add an extra day. And there are technical reasons for that, because back in the days, they didn't have the best din, the court, to announce when is the right day according to the calendar, the way they had to witness the moon, etc., etc. But today we have a calendar. Well, today we don't have any more questions regarding what day of the month it is. However, to explain that in Israel, where the holiness is stronger, they can accomplish the holiness in 1 day. Outside Israel, the holiness is less intense. We need to have 2 days of the holiness to accomplish what it takes in Israel 1 day. Just throwing this in, that is how he falls into Israel and outside of Israel. And that's why there is a concept in the Talmud that it says, Avira the Yisrael machkim, the ear of Israel makes people smarter. To study Torah, the best place is Israel. Just being in the atmosphere of Israel is already an advantage. But there's a lot to talk on that, because you can really bring the atmosphere of Israel in your home. You could be in Israel and not have that advantage, etc. But the beauty here is that when you feel I have come a long path, right? I have a lot of clippers in it surrounded myself by choice or not by choice. I didn't grow up with Torah, right? A lot of concealment of godliness, and yet I take the time to study. I take the time to pray. I take the time to make a mitzvah. That transformation that you are bringing the light from such a spiritual lower place than somebody who grew up a tzaddik and he's always been surrounded with Torah. The nachas Hashem has is a lot more intense from when it comes from a place where it's not as easy or is not as accessible. That in itself gives me the motivation to continue. And now comes the line in Tanya that I mentioned earlier. One of the 12 passages the Rebbe instituted that every child shall learn by heart is right here. This is the line here that we're going to read. I'll read it in Hebrew and I'll translate. This is the meaning of the verse, let Israel rejoice in the Maker, in Hashem. Psalm 149. What does that mean? Let us rejoice in his Maker. Meaning everyone who is of the seed of Israel ought to be joyous over God's joy. Since God rejoices greatly in making his home in the lowest of worlds, namely in the real physical world. The Hebrew word osaf, then his maker, has the same grammatical root as the word asiya, action. In Kabbalah, there are different worlds. There's the worlds of formation. There's the world of creation. The lower world is the world of action. We are the world of action. It's the physical world. So what does King David write? Yismach Yisrael be'oisav. A Jew should celebrate be'oisav. Oisav means make asiya, the world of action. A Jew should be celebrating that he is in the world of action. A neshama who is in the world of Yetzirah, world of formation, for example, cannot create the joy that a person down on this earth can unleash in Hashem. The verse suggests that that it is physical action which makes a home for God below, bringing a special joy to God, and this in turn ought to bring us joy. This explains why Oisav is written in the plural. The plural, alluding to this physical world of apparent multiplicity, right? The world looks like there's many different independent existence other than God, right? Okay, so God exists, but there's a world, there's a government, banks, there is the people, there's all different types of apparent independent existence. Yet we come to recognize, right? And why is that? That we live in a world of multi different individual entities that seems to us that they are kind of separated from Hashem. Why do I look at the world and think the world is one entity? Okay, God exists, but the world is one entity. God is another entity. Why do I feel this way? Why do I see it this way? That is a direct result of Klippa. Klippa conceals. Because if I would see God's present in everything, I would have no question. I wouldn't say that the world is an independent existence. I see that the world is a complete only dependent on Hashem's existence. It cannot exist without Hashem's existence. And this is what we read earlier in Isaiah. It says when Mashiach will come, we're all going to see we're all going to see the glory of Hashem. The veil is going to be lifted. The klippa is going to be gone, and there'll be no more questions. But if I live my life by the consciousness that everything behind the klippa is the true, which conceals the true unity of God with creation. For this reason, the zone of klippa sitra acha is referred to by the Zohar as the public domain, literally the domain of the many, implying a force which conceals the unity of God. And the zone of klippa sitra acha is also referred to by Zohar as the divided mountain peaks, since the perception is that of separateness and division. And through the transformation of these negative force to light, they're rendered into a private domain, literally the domain of the one of this faith in God's non-dual oneness. He touches upon an end in the laws of Shabbos. There is a concept of a public domain and a private domain. We know that on Shabbos you're not allowed to carry in the public domain, right? What do you do if you want to create a private domain? You can create an Eruv. You heard the Eruv. Take a string, and a bunch of poles, and you can take a whole section of a city, whole section of a town, and you can kind of create a private domain, which sounds to many people very confusing. How do you the little string creates a private domain? But without going into all the yes, the details of it. The point is, one of the point is, what is the concept of Shabbos? What is Shabbos? Shabbos is the day of Hashem. Shabbos where we feel closer to Hashem. Shabbos where we are elevated to a higher level, the higher spiritual level. But it takes also, we need to do something about it. But it's a consciousness. So we need to in general, when he's saying here in Tanya, a Jew needs to learn to change his glasses from seeing the world as a public domain to seeing the world as a private domain. Meaning a private domain, meaning that the world is a domain that is one of Hashem. Public domain, as he says here, is the clippers are running the show. Who's running the show of the world? Is it the clipper that is running the show, or is it Hashem running the show? If I just look at the world, I say clipper's running the show. It's a public domain. Hashem is also part of it, but there's multiple different people in authority. they're running the government. And our job is to turn the world and look at the world as a private domain, that everything in this world is run by Hashem, and everything else is it's just a facade. That's why Hanukkah, we have to bring the light of menorah to the public domain. Hanukkah has the power to bring the light of Hashem, the miracle, in the public domain, and the menorah has to be lit by the window looking out to the streets. The spiritual power of Hanukkah is the light of Hashem. And the notion that people think there is, expression in Yiddish, Ayit in Stub, Agoy in the gas. We have to be a Jew in the house. That's where you're Jewish. Once you're on the streets, you gotta act like everybody else. You just be like a Gentile, like a guy. Pick up your yarmulke, hide your Jewishness, not because of anti-Semitism, just because they run the world. It comes the message of Hanukkah. The Hanukkah, when you have the light of Hashem, there is nothing that can conceal it. And that's a message in our life. So the light of Hashem is our neshama. So if we, as a theme of Tanya, if the priority in our life is our neshama, so not just a priority, but this is who we define ourselves with, then Klippa gets dissolved. Klippa has no chance. But that takes work. That's the meditation of Shema Yisrael, the oneness of Hashem, the joy that comes out of it. When you say Shema Yisrael, we say right after Haftas Hashem, and I love Hashem. What is the connection of oneness of Hashem to love Hashem? The oneness of Hashem is the faith that we have in Hashem, understanding not just how we believe in Hashem, but also understanding my place on this earth, that I am here to reveal the oneness of Hashem. That gives me purpose and meaning. That gives me joy. That makes me love Hashem. That's why I want to teach my children Torah. That's why I want to do the mitzvahs. All right. It's all a matter of how you say things. I'll finish up with an anecdote. So on Shabbos, I spoke about Moshe and Aaron. And Aaron was the translator of Moshe when he spoke to Paro. So Paro is the embodiment of ego, of the evil inclination of Klippa, right? And how do you talk to Klippa? How do you talk to Paro? Moshe, Hashem says, you speak the words the way I spoke to you. Speak word by word, verbatim in Hebrew to Paro, and then Aaron will go and translate. So the question was, why does Moshe have to speak in the first place? Let Aaron be the translator. Let Moshe tell Aaron before they go into the chamber, and then you speak in Egyptian. Aaron should speak in Egyptian to Paro. And we spoke about that sometimes that it's important to share the words of Hashem as is, because the words of Hashem in itself makes an impact, even if the ego cannot comprehend, power cannot comprehend. But the very fact that those same words are uttered already makes an impact. So the anecdote is of a telegram, right? I when I tell my children about Telegram, they think it's an app on the phone, right? But everyone here remembers telegrams, getting telegrams, right? Every letter costed money, and dots and different acronyms. So this mother gets a telegram from her son, but she can't. It was written in codes. She can't decipher the codes. So somebody in the city his job was to read the telegram out loud. So he says she writes Eliza's, and he says, "Dear mother, I need money." So she goes, what a kvetch! All he wants is money. And she's very upset. The next day, another guy comes in, and another guy who reads Telegram, but he reads it differently. He has a little bit more passion, and he writes it, "Dear mother, I need some money." The way it was said was like, She goes, oh, for my child, of course I want to give him the money, right? The same telegram, but it was read differently in different tone. So the way we read, the way we understand something, if it's done just cold, it's very flat. But if we understand, and the faith is, we live by our faith, it's invigorating, it's inspiring. Everything else, the nachas we have, and the same thing with Hashem. When you do a mitzvah, it's not like Hashem says, okay, nice, good job. There's a tremendous nachas unleashed. If you think about it, go do a mitzvah. Thank you. Any questions before I sign off? All right, Sandy has no questions. I accomplished a lot today.
You always have questions, but
all right, to be continued.
another time.
Class tomorrow, and those who haven't joined on Thursday, I started a new class on life and death and Yiddishkeit, 1 o'clock p.m. on the same Zoom. Have a safe week and be well.